If you're stuck deciding between Mount Pleasant and Daniel Island, this is one of the most important decisions you can make in the Charleston real estate market. Not because one is automatically better than the other, but because they attract a lot of the same buyers on paper, but they deliver two very different versions of the Charleston lifestyle. Both are expensive compared to most of the Charleston market. Both attract relocating families, executives, retirees, professionals, investors, and people who want a higher end low country lifestyle. But the way you live in each area, the type of home you get for your money, the buyer pool, the resale story, and even the long-term value can be very different. And this is where a lot of people make mistakes. They look online and see nice houses, pretty streets, high prices, good schools, and close access to Charleston. So they assume Mount Pleasant and Daniel Island are just two luxury options that could be compared by price per square foot. But that's not how this market works. A home in Mount Pleasant and a home in Daniel Island can be similar in size and price, but the buyer may be paying for completely different things. In Mount Pleasant, you're often paying for location flexibility, beach proximity, established neighborhoods, school demand, convenience, and access to multiple versions of the Charleston lifestyle. On Daniel Island, you're often paying for community design, consistency, trails, parks, walkability, club lifestyle, prestige, and the feeling of being in a planned, polished environment. That difference matters whether you're buying or selling, because if you're buying, you need to know which lifestyle actually fits you. And if you're selling, you need to understand what buyers are actually paying for so that your home is positioned correctly. So let's break down Mount Pleasant versus Daniel Island the right way. Mount Pleasant feels like a full town. Daniel Island feels like a master planned community. The one sentence explains a lot. Mount Pleasant is larger, more varied, and more layered. You have older neighborhoods, new construction pockets, waterfront homes, luxury estates, condos, townhomes, family subdivisions, golf course communities, retail centers, medical offices, restaurants, gyms, parks, boat landings. You have Shem Creek, Old Village, and quick access to Sullivan's Island and Isle of Palms. You can live in Mount Pleasant and have completely different lifestyles depending on where you're at. South Mount Pleasant feels more historic, coastal, and connected to downtown Charleston. Areas near Old Village, Shem Creek, Coleman Boulevard, Ion, Cooper Estates, and the neighborhoods closer to the Ravenel Bridge tend to carry a different kind of appeal. There's character. There are mature trees, older homes, and stronger downtown access. There's more of that classic Charleston feel. North Mount Pleasant feels more suburban, newer, and family-focused in many pockets. Places around Carolina Park, Park West, Dunes West, Rivertown, and Highway 41 tend to attract buyers who want more space, newer homes, neighborhood amenities, strong family infrastructure, and a quieter day-to-day environment. That is one of the biggest things people miss. Mount Pleasant is not one market. A buyer who loves Old Village may not love Park West. A buyer who wants Carolina Park may not want the maintenance that comes with an older South Mount Pleasant home. A buyer who wants to be 5 minutes from Sullivan's Island is probably thinking differently than a buyer who wants a larger home, newer construction, and a neighborhood pool. That is why you can't evaluate Mount Pleasant with broad statements. The exact pocket matters a lot. The street matters, the school zone matters, the flood zone matters, the age of the home matters, the commute pattern, the renovation quality, even being on one side of the road versus the other can change the feel and value. Daniel Island is different. Daniel Island has variety too, but it's variety inside a much more controlled environment. You have condos, townhomes, single-family homes, luxury and waterfront properties, marshview homes, and the higher-end Daniel Island Park section. But the island as a whole feels more unified. The streets, parks, trails, commercial areas, neighborhood design, and amenities were planned to work together. That is one of Daniel Island's biggest strengths. It feels intentional. You're not just buying a house, you're buying the environment around the house. You're buying the ability to walk or bike to trails, parks, restaurants, the waterfront, and community events. You're buying the polished neighborhood feel. You're buying consistency, and you're buying the reputation. You're buying into a community that has a very clear identity. And that's why Daniel Island usually carries an upcharge. A lot of buyers ask, why is Daniel Island so expensive? The answer is not just the homes, it's the full package. Daniel Island is priced the way it is because people are paying for more than bedrooms and bathrooms. They're paying for the planned lifestyle. They're paying for the convenience. They're paying for the trails, the community feel. They're paying for prestige and scarcity. In Daniel Island Park, they're often paying for access to one of the most exclusive residential environments in the Charleston area. So if you're comparing Daniel Island to Mount Pleasant only by house size, Daniel Island may look overpriced. But if you're comparing the full lifestyle, the premium starts to make more sense. That doesn't mean Daniel Island is the right fit for everyone. It means you need to know what you're actually paying for. If your goal is to get the most square footage for the money, Daniel Island is definitely not the right fit. If your goal is to be as close as possible to Sullivan's Island or Isle of Palms, Mount Pleasant will make more sense. If you want more neighborhood variety and more control over the exact type of lifestyle you choose, Mount Pleasant usually gives you more options. But if you want a clean, polished, connected community where the lifestyle is built into the neighborhood itself, Daniel Island is hard to replicate. That's why people move there. Now, let's talk about who's actually moving to each area. Mount Pleasant attracts a broad buyer pool. You have families moving for schools, you have professionals who want to be close to downtown Charleston, you have people who want quick beach access, you have retirees who want convenience without being isolated, you have locals moving up into a more established area, you have out-of-state buyers relocating from higher cost markets, you have second home buyers, you have investors, and you have buyers who want a coastal lifestyle without living directly on a barrier island. Mount Pleasant appeals to people who want options. They may want a luxury home near the water. They may want a newer family home in a master planned neighborhood. They may want an older home with character. They may want a townhome near a restaurant or something close to the bridge. Or they might want something closer to the beaches. That range is a major strength. It also means buyers need guidance, because the wrong section of Mount Pleasant can feel completely different from what someone expected originally. I've seen buyers come in thinking they want Mount Pleasant as if that is one lifestyle. But once they see the difference between South Mount Pleasant and North Mount Pleasant, they realize the real decision is so much more specific. Daniel Island attracts a more targeted buyer. The Daniel Island buyer often wants lifestyle to be simple, polished, and connected. They may be relocating from a more expensive metro and want a place that feels easy to understand. They might want their kids to be able to bike to parks. They may want trails, events, restaurants, and neighborhood amenities. They may want the prestige of saying they live on Daniel Island. They may want the club access, golf, tennis, boating, or a more exclusive social environment. Daniel Island is especially appealing to buyers who want to land in Charleston and immediately feel like they belong to a community. That's a powerful selling point. When someone moves from out of state, they're not only buying a house, they're trying to rebuild their life. They're choosing where their kids will make friends, where they'll spend their weekends, where they'll walk their dog, where they'll meet people, and where they'll go to dinner. Daniel Island solves a lot of that for the right buyer. Mount Pleasant gives you more choices. Daniel Island gives you more structure. Now, let's compare lifestyle more directly. If beach access is a major priority, Mount Pleasant usually wins. For many parts of Mount Pleasant, Sullivan's Island and Isle of Palms are part of normal life. You can head to the beach, go to dinner near the water, spend time at Shem Creek, walk the bridge, or get downtown without feeling like it has to be a full day plan. Mount Pleasant gives you that classic coastal Charleston rhythm. Daniel Island is not a beach community. It is waterfront and marsh oriented, but not beach oriented. The lifestyle is more about trails, parks, golf carts, community events, restaurants, docks, river views, club amenities, and neighborhood convenience. You can still get to the beaches from Daniel Island, but it's not going to feel as immediate as it does from Mount Pleasant. That detail matters a lot with where traffic's at today. If you picture your Charleston life as beach mornings, boat days, Sullivan's Island dinners, Isle of Palm weekends, and Shem Creek sunsets, Mount Pleasant is probably going to feel more natural. If you picture your Charleston life instead as morning walks on trails, kids riding bikes through the neighborhood, golf carts, community events, in a more polished neighborhood setting, Daniel Island is going to be a better fit. Neither one is wrong, they're just very different. Now, let's talk about commute and daily convenience. Mount Pleasant's very strong if your life is tied to downtown Charleston, East Cooper, the beaches, or the south side of town. South Mount Pleasant gives you a very convenient connection over the Ravenel Bridge. You can be close to downtown, close to the beach, and close to some of the most recognizable lifestyle spots in the area. But Mount Pleasant traffic is real. You have to watch out for the bridge, Coleman Boulevard, Highway 17, school traffic patterns, beach traffic patterns, and summer weekends. A house can look close on a map and still feel very different at 8 in the morning or on a Saturday during beach season. Daniel Island has a different advantage. It has a strong regional access because of its connection to I-526. That can make it more convenient for the airport, North Charleston, parts of Mount Pleasant, downtown Charleston, and the growing Kenhoy and Wando areas. It may not be the closest option to the beach, but it's very strategically positioned within the region. For someone who travels often, works near North Charleston, wants airport access, or needs to move between multiple parts of the Charleston area, Daniel Island can be extremely practical. That's one of the details that often gets overlooked in this decision. Daniel Island is not just expensive because it's pretty. It's expensive because the location works, the community is strong, and the lifestyle is easy to understand. Now let's talk about the real estate. Mount Pleasant is one of the most resilient markets in the Charleston area because it has so many demand drivers. It has location, schools, beach access to downtown, shopping, restaurants, luxury demand, relocation demand, and in the most desirable areas, it has limited land. That combination helps protect long-term value. But because Mount Pleasant is so varied, pricing requires local precision. You can't just say this is Mount Pleasant, so it's worth this. That is not how buyers think. A renovated home in prime South Mount Pleasant location is not competing the same way as a larger home farther north. A home near beach access routes is not the same as a home deeper into a suburban neighborhood. A house in an established neighborhood with mature trees may attract a completely different buyer than a newer home with modern finishes and neighborhood amenities. This is where I bring a lot of value for clients. I'm not just looking at surface level numbers. I'm looking at why a buyer would choose that specific home over the other options they have. because that's what creates leverage. For buyers, that means I can help you avoid overpaying just because a home has a Mount Pleasant address. For sellers, that means I can help position your property around its actual advantages, not just generic selling points that every other listing is using. Daniel Island works differently. On Daniel Island, buyers are often paying a premium because they want a full island lifestyle. That means condition, presentation, setting, and a story matter a lot. If a home is priced at a Daniel Island premium, the buyer expects it to feel like it belongs at that level. The home needs to be presented correctly. The photography needs to sell the lifestyle. The marketing needs to explain the community. The copy needs to highlight the trails, parks, walkability, club proximity, waterfront access, and daily convenience where applicable. A weak Daniel Island listing can undersell the very thing that makes the property valuable. The mistake is treating a Daniel Island home like a normal suburban listing. It's not. You're selling the home, but you're also selling the island identity. That's what buyers are actually paying for. Now, one of the biggest deciding factors for families is schools. Mount Pleasant is served by Charleston County School District, and buyers often ask about schools like Wando, Lucy Beckham, Moultrie, Mount Pleasant Academy, and others depending on the exact address. Daniel Island is part of Berkeley County, even though it's located within the city of Charleston. Daniel Island School serves K-8, and the high school path is commonly tied to Philip Simmons High School. This is one of those details that out-of-state buyers don't always catch. They see Charleston, Mount Pleasant, Daniel Island, Berkeley County, Charleston County, City of Charleston school zones, tax differences, and flood zones all overlapping, and it can get confusing very quickly. That's why I always tell clients, don't just make assumptions based on the map. You need to verify to the exact address. The wrong assumptions can affect schools, insurance, taxes, commute resale, and even how the home performs when you eventually sell. Now let's talk about the small differences people only notice after living here. Mount Pleasant has more everyday convenience spread throughout town. There are more big box stores, businesses, gyms, medical offices, restaurants, and shopping centers. There's way more variety. It feels like a complete town where you can handle most of your life without leaving. Daniel Island has convenience, but it's more curated. You have restaurants, shops, services, schools, parks, and amenities, but it's not trying to be a massive retail hub. It's trying to feel clean, livable, and contained. Mount Pleasant feels busier. Daniel Island feels more controlled. Mount Pleasant has more texture, and Daniel Island has more consistency. Mount Pleasant gives you more ways to live, while Daniel Island gives you a clearer lifestyle brand. That's a major difference. Some people love that Mount Pleasant has so many different pockets. They want character, choice, and variety. They like being able to choose between older charm, newer construction, beach proximity, golf communities, waterfront, and suburban convenience. Other people find that overwhelming. They want the decision to feel cleaner. They want the neighborhood to feel polished. They want the community to feel cohesive. They want to know exactly what they're buying into. Those people often gravitate towards Daniel Island. Now, from an investment and resale perspective, both areas have strong arguments. Mount Pleasant has broader demand, and that normally helps liquidity because there are more types of buyers who may want to live there. Families, professionals, retirees, locals, relocators, second home buyers, and beach-focused buyers all create demand. Daniel Island has stronger lifestyle scarcity. There are only so many homes in a community like Daniel Island, and the island has a reputation that carries weight. For the right property, that can create a very strong buyer emotion. But neither market is automatic. You still have to buy correctly. In Mount Pleasant, overpaying for the wrong location, ignoring flood risk, underestimating renovation costs, or choosing a home with weak resale appeal can hurt you drastically. On Daniel Island, paying a premium for a home that doesn't have the condition, location, view, or lifestyle appeal that buyers expect can also hurt you. That's why representation matters. A good agent should not just open the doors and send listings. They should help you understand the value. They should know what you care about in each neighborhood. They should know what will matter to you when you resell. And they should be able to explain why one home deserves a premium and why another does not. That's the level of guidance that I try to bring to every client. Because in Charleston, especially in areas like Mount Pleasant and Daniel Island, the most expensive mistake is not always buying in the wrong area. Sometimes it's buying the wrong home inside the right area. Now, if you're selling, this comparison matters just as much. If you own in Mount Pleasant, you need to know exactly which buyer your home is most likely to attract. Is your buyer coming for schools, beach access, downtown convenience, a newer family neighborhood, old village charm, water access, or something else? Those are all different marketing angles, and if the marketing is too generic, you blend in. Mount Pleasant sellers need a strategy that makes their home stand out against the right competition, not just every home in town. If you own on Daniel Island, the strategy is even more lifestyle driven. The buyer needs to feel the island before they ever schedule the showing. They need to understand the trails, the restaurants, and everything else that comes with it. That's where strong positioning can make a real difference, because buyers don't pay top dollar just because the home is nice. They pay top dollar when the home feels like the answer to the life that they're trying to build. You need someone to tell you what to watch out for. You need someone who can explain why a home is priced the way it is, what the resale story looks like, and what buyers will care about later. That's how you protect yourself. And if you're selling, You need someone who understands how to create demand around the details that matter the most. A Mount Pleasant listing needs to be positioned differently from a Daniel Island listing. A South Mount Pleasant listing also needs to be distinguished from a North Mount Pleasant listing. That's what I focus on. So if you're thinking about moving to Mount Pleasant, Daniel Island, or anywhere in the Charleston area, reach out to me before you start trying to figure it out alone. I'll help you compare the areas, break down neighborhoods, look at the real numbers, evaluate resale, and understand which homes actually make sense for you. And if you're thinking about selling in either Mount Pleasant or Daniel Island, I can help you position your home directly to the buyers who are already comparing these two communities. Because the difference between getting attention and getting overlooked usually comes down to strategy. And the difference between making a smart move and an expensive mistake usually comes down to local expertise. Mount Pleasant and Daniel Island are both incredible options, but they're not interchangeable. And once you understand the difference, the right choice becomes a lot clearer.